This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. A former drug dealer has been sentenced to jail time in the overdose death of 14-year-old Carson Cremeni. The teen died in 2019 in a case that was as high profile as it was tragic. Michelle Gassoub was in court, and as she tells us, it is not the outcome the victim's family had hoped for.
The man who sold Carson Cremeni the drugs that killed him will serve 18 months in jail for manslaughter. He can't be named because he was also a minor when he sold 14-year-old Cremeni 10 grams of MDMA in 2019. It was in this Langley skate park that Cremeni consumed the drugs and began to overdose. Other teens at the park filmed what was happening and posted the videos online.
We'll never be the same again without him, right? So, I mean, what he took away from us can't be measured.
The young man who sold the drugs pled guilty to manslaughter. He was found responsible for Cremeni's death because he misled him about just how much he had sold and did nothing once the teen was in crisis.
I'm very emotional, to be honest. The sentence to me, we would have liked 2 years incarceration, 18 months. It's close. I think it's much bigger than that.
The case, one of the first in BC where a drug dealer was found guilty for an overdose death.
We hope that he's a symbol to future kids who end up witnessing a similar situation or witnessing another person in trouble, to be a reminder that you should speak up, you should phone for help.
The judge in this case described it as a 21st century Lord of the Flies, with young people standing by but not doing anything to intervene. She said the family had been consumed by a black hole of grief. They said Carson was a kid who craved friendship and belonging above all else. There are no winners in this case, said the judge in her sentence, but hopefully some painful lessons. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, New Westminster.
Police say it will be several months before we know what caused the massive fire that destroyed a school in Port Coquitlam. Hazel Trembath Elementary burned to the ground almost 2 weeks ago. Authorities have deemed it suspicious, but the RCMP says they still don't have any suspects.
Investigators have collected 200 hours of surveillance video, conducted hundreds of witness statements, and followed up on numerous tips from the community.
Police are still asking any other witnesses or people with information to contact them. The roughly 250 students of Hazel Trembath have been moved to another facility. Vancouver police have raided the office of a drug activist group. Investigators seized drugs and arrested 2 people. But as John Hernandez tells us, the group says the substances were tested and meant for users in need.
This group was knowingly, illegally trafficking in drugs. As a result, we took action to stop it.
The investigation had been ongoing since September. Vancouver police targeting the Drug User Liberation Front office at this East Hastings intersection where drugs were made available to dozens of users.
While Dolph's actions were intended to reduce the harms caused by the toxic, illicit drug supply, we have always warned that anyone who violates the Criminal Code or the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act should expect to face enforcement and criminal charges.
2 East Vancouver homes were also raided, 2 people arrested, and drugs seized.
There's substances that we believe are heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine.
The group, commonly known as DULF, has operated in the community for 3 years, distributing drugs allegedly bought from the dark web to about 50 users in need.
We started the Drug User Liberation Front because nobody else was coming to save us, so we knew we had to do something ourselves.
Garth Mullins, one of the group's co-founders, said they tried to get Health Canada approval to operate, but were denied. Still, they did receive a $200,000 grant from Vancouver Coastal Health to test their drugs.
I know a bunch of people who relied on that who are now going to have to go to the street supply, not a tested, clean supply of drugs. They're going to have to go and take their chances with fentanyl off the street.
Supporting organized crime is not life-saving work.
In the legislature, the opposition leader questioned whether provincial funds were used to buy illicit drugs, a charge denied by the public safety minister.
Once government became aware that of the situation, the contract was immediately canceled. Their contract was for drug testing, not for the purchase of illicit drugs.
While BC's premier hopes the raid sends a message to other groups operating illegally.
Even though they were doing that important life-saving work, they were also breaking the law, and we can't have it.
A police raid amid a toxic drug crisis that's claimed more than 1,400 lives this year. No charges have been laid, at least not yet. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Police now say a body found at the scene of an explosion in Langley earlier this week was not a murder victim. Neighbors reported a loud blast on Tuesday at a home on 8th Avenue near 240th Street. After crews put out the fire, they found human remains and called in homicide investigators. Now the case has been passed back to the Langley RCMP Serious Crimes Unit, and we'll try to figure out what led to that explosion. After a month-long freeze of Indian visas for Canadian citizens, some visa services have resumed. Visas for entry, business, medical purposes, and conferences will be issued. That announcement led to long lineups outside offices in BC today.
So it took us around 4.5 hours for the overall process. Yeah, it's kind of a pain for the people, but it's all about politics and stuff.
It's really very hassle for all the people who's waiting for a long time, and this cold weather, and it's freaking very cold, and we are suffering. We are the Mango people, and we are the one who's suffering. I think it's the government who has to take care of their diplomatic relationship, but I don't know why we Mango people have to suffer all this.
It's still not clear if and when tourist visas will be available for Canadians. India suspended visa processing after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau alleged the Indian government may have been involved in the killing of a pro-Khalistan activist in Surrey. The BC government has joined forces with the BC Parks Foundation now and setting aside $300 million to conserve and protect forests.
This conservation finance mechanism is how we will work together, First Nations, provincial government, the private sector, to protect the beauty of this province for generations to come.
The money aims to save old-growth forest and Indigenous protected and conserved areas while offering sustainable economic alternatives for people who work in forestry. Metro Vancouver's plans to bring camping to Bowen Island is going slower than a lineup at Horseshoe Bay. While they may have the land, they don't seem to have the buy-in from Islanders. As Justin McElroy explains, recent updates to Metro's board do not give much hope to those eager to pitch their tent.
Metro Vancouver paid $40 million to create a park and campground on Bowen Island, but it's an increasing question whether it will actually happen.
No issue has united the citizens of Bowen as this proposal has for overnight camping at Cape Roger. Young, old, rich, poor, developers, conservationists, all walks lead to a tentless park.
That was last week at a Metro Vancouver Regional Parks meeting. Bowen Island Council has raised additional demands before they agreed to the necessary rezoning to let it happen. So has the island's trust. Now, there are lots of issues, but the biggest sticking point is whether overnight camping will be allowed. And as Bowen's mayor warned Metro Vancouver, residents aren't happy that it's still on the table even after consultations.
When I put myself in the mind of the local residents, has me wondering they might feel that they were engaged in more of a public relations exercise as opposed to an actual engagement exercise.
Now, sometimes the loudest people don't represent the majority, but not in this case. Here is a chart. Metro Vancouver surveyed about 1,000 people this summer about the park. Half lived on Bowen and half lived in the rest of the region. 73% of people off the island supported the draft plan, but on Bowen it was just 33%. There's a clear divide here with no obvious solution that satisfies everyone. The only thing for sure right now is that Metro Vancouver taxpayers are paying for a big $40 million question mark. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
A BC teenager is being honored with a Good Samaritan Award after he saved his grandfather's life on a hunting trip gone wrong.
I can't really remember, it just kind of all happened. I don't know, it's just instincts. Do what you gotta do, and then it all worked out.
Last November, Carter and John Burkhardt were hunting in Lake Cowichan when the 68-year-old man became pinned under their quad bike and broke his back. Carter called for help using his GPS and spoke with a medical dispatcher via text to get John out from under that vehicle.
He was just so incredible. He was so brave. He provided all the information we needed. His willingness to help, his own fortitude to set up a landing zone, and just he did everything right, and he saved his grandpa's life.
First responders are asking anyone going into the backcountry to take an emergency contact device with them, just in case you run into a similar emergency. A Prince George couple has gone all out, to say the least, with their Halloween decorations this year. Between full-time jobs and raising 3 children, they have managed to turn their front yard into a ghoul-infested maze and haunted house, complete with actors and animatronics. Have a look.
We're big horror fans, horror movies, that sort of thing. We just love the faces on the kids and seeing their surprised looks. Even the adults, it's so much fun to scare adults. And
I think it's more entertaining to scare the adults than
definitely.
the kids.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer that you got to earn your candy. You can't just walk up and say trick or treat and here you go. No, you got to get a little scared too.
We had an incident a few years ago where a young girl came through and she was bawling at the door. So I'm like, we have to change this so the little ones don't have to go through, and then whoever wants to go through, they can go through.
Kids can kind of come up here and check out the graveyard, and then they can come back, and if they want to come through the scary maze, then they're welcome to. But we also do at the first hour of our haunt, all the kids can kind of go through the maze. We're not going to have any actors out or anything turned on unless they want it turned on. So. Yeah, I basically start decorating September 1st. I start planning. I start putting stuff together September 1st, and because I work full time as well, so it's tough. Whenever we have a chance, we're plugging away at it. I think it's great. I think we're becoming an influence for sure. I know when we first started decorating, our neighbor across the street here, he kind of started decorating, and he's buying more things, and he bought his first 12-foot skeleton, and then a couple houses down, the same thing. Yeah, it's just been really great. I love that we're kind of influencing the whole neighborhood. We're trying to be the candy cane lane of Halloween. That's kind of what we're looking to do.
You make me walk through that to get to a piece of candy. It better be a large coffee crisp, Darius Madabi.
I think you need more than that. As you know, Dan, I do not like jump scares, so I don't know if a coffee crisp is going to cut it.
What, do you have some recent experience with that?
Mm-hmm. As you well know, I do. It happened live on TV, which is not the best place to be scared.
Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
Anyway, the weather.
Yeah, one thing that's not scary is the weather, because this is one of those days where I could have gone home early, because there's not much to talk about. It is cold, but that's just about it. A little bit of snow happening in the northeast, some just starting in the southeast, and more is likely to come tonight. But over the next 24 hours, we see that start to build up here around Cranbrook. And then that's really it, because if we look at the next 24 hours after that, pretty much dry across the entire province. Nothing really else to speak of. With that being said, it is going to be cold. So if there was any moisture passing through, a lot of places it would be falling as snow more than likely. And over the next few days, those highs starting to come up a little bit in some places, but not by much. So by the coast, we start to get a little bit warmer. The hint of maybe us getting warm enough to go outside without a coat on Halloween, or at least not a big bulky one that covers your whole costume, because that is the worst. But yes, conditions fairly clear tonight. Whatever cloud we do have, for the most part, clearing up for tomorrow. And here in Vancouver, no cloud at all to speak of. So tomorrow, sunny skies. And again, just keep in mind, maybe wear a coat tomorrow.
Okay, good advice. Thank you, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
Ice skaters from around the world will be in Vancouver this weekend, competing in the invitation-only Skate Canada International. Canadian figure skating pair Piper Gillis and Paul Poirier have had to contend with more than the regular grueling training regimen. Last January, Gillis got an appendectomy, forcing her to take a break from competitions. Then in May, she shared she was undergoing treatment for stage 1 ovarian cancer. Today, though, they were back on the ice, as you saw, practicing their routine.
I feel so much better. I mean, obviously there's still things that I have to do to monitor. I mean, that's just part of my life now, and I think what you have to do is you have to embrace it. You know, I could sit there and be like, oh man, this never ends, but I think that's just part of life. You have to kind of keep looking forward.
Gillis Poirier won gold at Skate Canada in October last year and went on to win 2 more events before she took her medical leave, only to come back in March and win bronze at the World Championships in Saitama, Japan. The pair are looking forward to showcasing their new Wuthering Heights-inspired routine at the Doug Mitchell Thunderbird Sports Centre at UBC. Expo 86, the Vancouver fair that drew global attention and was responsible for spawning a plethora of souvenirs. After the break, our Justin McElroy is going to share his quirky collection live. Thanks for joining our commercial-free live stream tonight. A new survey suggests Canadians who work from home spend nearly twice as much time sitting than people who work at an office. Not taking breaks has been shown to be bad for workers' long-term health. Tashana Reed now is looking at what is working to keep employers moving.
For Laura Meadows, returning to the office has its benefits.
I've definitely seen an uptick in how much I've been able to exercise.
She walks 2 hours at this treadmill desk, and during lunch breaks, takes a walk outside.
It's been amazing to just feel like better energy levels, better mood, better productivity, clearer minds.
A new national survey suggests where you work may impact your level of physical activity. The online survey of more than 1,000 employees found that fully remote workers spent on average 6.2 hours out of an 8-hour workday sitting. For full-time office workers, that number is almost cut in half.
With many of us working still remotely or a hybrid model, we have lost those additional opportunities to kind of get active and socialize at the same time.
Opportunities for light exercise like walking during a daily commute or going for coffee. And new data from Statistics Canada says during the pandemic, Canadian adults spent more hours in front of screens during their workday, from 2 hours or less in 2018 to more than 4 hours in 2021.
The large majority of adults in Canada are not meeting national physical activity guidelines, which definitely puts them at risk for a number of health consequences.
Go and exercise.
But health experts say even small changes can make a difference. Like spending a few minutes every hour stretching and standing, or spacing out meetings.
Have a 15-minute gap. That way you can go for a quick walk, or you can be just doing something else besides staring at the computer.
Another tip to motivate employees, group exercise challenges.
I'll be going around my kitchen island just to get those extra 1,000 steps I need to get into the top spot.
And no matter where you work, taking steps to be more active has positive benefits. Tashana Reed, CBC News, Toronto.
We are starting a new segment on CBC Vancouver News at 6 called Throwback Thursday, where we take a deep dive into our vast archives. 37 years ago in October, Vancouver's Expo 86 came to an end, after which a huge auction was held where all things Expo were sold, from clothing to big animals. Have a look.
Looking for a good automobile? Have I got a car for you. Remember this? It's the Filipino Jeepney. It was sitting in the Land Plaza at Expo. This vehicle, along with a lot of other stuff, goes on sale at the Dome starting tomorrow.
Maynard's auctioneers are getting ready for the biggest auction they have ever handled. Thousands of items are on the block. Office furniture, including Jim Patterson's desk, a carved Gitscan cedar door, golf carts, boats, cars, and trucks, including some customized beauties. 596 lots in all, and some of the lots contain a number of items.
Of course, some of the things for sale here don't exactly have 1,000 uses. This is a beautiful piece of workmanship, a solid wooden ox cart, complete with driver, but it's not the sort of thing you'd want to put on your front lawn. Imagine the look on your wife's face if you brought this home.
A lot of money will change hands here during the next 2 days. After Maynard's takes a cut, the profits go to Expo. Exactly how much money that isn't known yet.
I think it's a little bit, premature for us to put a number to it. I mean, many things have just been added at the last minute, and we don't have an idea or haven't even estimated as to what the sales are going to be in the first couple of days.
Not everything will be auctioned off. A lot of things will be sold at marked prices, and the prices aren't too bad. There are thousands of things on sale. Hats, for example, enough here to start a haberdashery.
There are enough clothes here to start a clothing store, new and used, in every shape, size, and color. Need some plants? How about a bike, a poster, a stroller, some yard furniture perhaps, or even an Expo sign as a souvenir?
There are exit signs, entrance signs, East Gate Station, West Gate Station, map signs of every description, all ready for Expo souvenir hunters to snap up. And they undoubtedly will all be snapped up. Some of the signs are kind of humorous. Could you imagine planting something like that outside your bedroom door?
This is just part of what will eventually be sold by Expo. Some of the stuff is still being used. Other things will be sold by tender, like buildings and rides.
We're now joined by our municipal affairs reporter who's not laying it on too thick, BC nostalgia connoisseur, Justin McElroy. Sorry for bothering you, buddy. Now, for someone who, for the record, was not alive...
see you there, Dan.
Yes, indeed. You weren't alive around during Expo, unlike some of us. You have quite a number of souvenirs from the World's Fair. What's on the top 5 list?
Well, there is so much stuff that was created along that time. Part of it was also because Vancouver was having its 100th anniversary as a city. So there were things developed in conjunction, like tote bags, as well as this pattern that was made that was turned into a shirt as well, celebrating the 100th. A lot of sky... And ties, for example. But there was lots of stuff, of course, Expo specific. You have to talk about pins as well, of course, the famous logo and font there. There was even an Archie comic that was created specifically where Archie and the gang go to Vancouver for Expo, and it's basically an advertorial for them to go to exhibit after exhibit after exhibit. And of course, everyone has their own custom things from Expo as well that they hung on to. And I managed to get one of those pieces. People might remember the McBarge, the floating McDonald's that was in Falls Creek. Indeed. Well, there were plenty of chairs on that amazing, beautiful vessel, and I happen to be sitting on one of those chairs right now.
Well, give us a gander. What does that look like?
Yeah, well, you can see it's just an ordinary sort of chair with an anchor that still looks pretty good for, some 37 years after the fact. Still holds together well. The McBarge, of course, a little bit more derelict these days, sitting in Maple Ridge, constant dreams for what it could be. But it's amazing just how many people hold on to weird little tidbits from that time. It's an era that people still celebrate to this day in Vancouver. And just no matter where you are, if you have an old garage somewhere and you attended Expo or you had a parent that attended it, odds are they will have something in their attic or garage space.
And I have to ask you, how did you get all this stuff?
Like you said, I wasn't alive during Expo, but lots of people, because of my pin collection and just my enjoyment of nostalgia for British Columbia, often offer to give me stuff. And I have to say no to most of it, including some Expo Ernie things as well. But sometimes you have to say yes, especially when it's, say, a McBarge chair, a pin, or an Archie comic.
No kidding. Justin McElroy, thanks for the tie.
Thanks, Dan.
Fears and worries throughout Maine as a gunman accused of killing at least 18 people is still on the loose. The latest after this.
When I come to kettlebell kickboxing, I have this energy and it just calms everything down. I can pray, I can just enjoy myself when I'm here.
Ready, all the way up, all the way down.
And I've been like grieving since 2016. I lost my husband and my grandson and my son. And this has brought balance to my life. So that's the reason I can't quit now. I know where my happiness is. And the things that I can do now, like it's unbelievable, especially with my age. I turned 76 on the 9th of October. And like I feel good, I don't feel my age. It's a big part of my life. This exercise, it keeps me healthy. I've had osteoarthritis, I've had high blood pressure, diabetes. Since I started this, I don't have them anymore. I'm not on any kind of medication. So like I encourage all the older people, and especially the young ones, when I'm with my grandkids, they see that Kokum is strong. And I think they're very proud of me to see me the way I am now. I mean, they were proud of me before, but now more than ever, because like I'm their protector. And I know, like, I don't care how old I am. They say, my grandma will get you, especially the young grandchildren. Get my grandma after you. When they sang happy birthday to me here on the 11th, I told them I was still going to be here when I'm 90. That's my goal.
A massive search is underway for an armed suspect after last night's mass shootings in Lewiston, Maine. But police have now zeroed in on the suspect's last known home. These were some of the officers gearing up before they moved in toward the house. They're looking for the lone suspect in a rampage that has killed 18 people and wounded 13. The deadliest so far in the U.S. this year. Alison Northcott has more from a city scarred by the violence.
Amid a tense and terrifying time for residents in Lewiston, Governor Janet Mills announced a somber tally of the dead and injured.
This city did not deserve this terrible assault on its citizens, on its peace of mind, on its sense of security.
Seven County got multiple victims. I need multiple victims. I need every unit you can find.
Police scanners Wednesday evening after the shootings began. The victims were gunned down in a restaurant, others in a bowling alley.
Out of nowhere, he just came in and there was a loud pop. I just booked it down the lane and I slid basically into where the pins are and climbed up in the machine.
We started hearing sirens just like all night long, crazy stuff. And then we looked it up and it was just a massacre and it was really sad.
The gunman fled, prompting a massive manhunt. Residents here and in surrounding areas told to shelter in place.
This suspect is still at large.
Officials say the suspect, 40-year-old Robert Card of Bowen, Maine, should be considered armed and dangerous.
We also have an incredibly strong laser-like focus on bringing this suspect into custody and ultimately to justice.
Card is a U.S. Army reservist. The New York Army National Guard said there was an incident in the summer when he acted erratically at a training site, which led to a medical evaluation. As more victims were identified, some family members waited in anguish for answers.
When you get anything that happens like this, you go empty. And there's just nothing you can do.
At the Canadian border with Maine, which touches New Brunswick and Quebec, Canada Border Services Agency says all points of entry remain open, but it issued an armed and dangerous firearms lookout, alerting officers of this high-risk person and situation. Maine's governor says she and U.S. President Joe Biden have ordered all U.S. and state flags to be lowered to half-staff to honor those who are injured and remember those who died. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Lewiston, Maine.
David He grew up here in Vancouver and now attends Bates College in Lewiston. He was caught up in the shooting and was in lockdown. He says he first sheltered in a classroom, but around 1 this morning decided to make a run for it back to his dorm room.
I went back downstairs, stood outside, just looked outside to see if it was safe, and took a deep breath and just like sprinted towards my dorm. It was only around 100 meters or 50 meters. It's not a super far walk, but it was probably the longest I've ever felt. I walked that trail, or I walked that route regularly for my classes, and this time it felt really different.
The Prime Minister says he is going to pause the federal carbon tax on home heating oil. That pause would be in effect for the next 3 years. He's also raising the carbon tax rebate in rural areas. As Rafi Boudjikanian tells us, Justin Trudeau says he wants to make it easier for people to switch to electric heat pumps.
Just a couple of hours before the Prime Minister's announcement he was changing the carbon tax plan, his Environment Minister was in the House defending it.
It's basic math. If it costs more to grow food, it will cost more to buy food. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost.
Setting aside for a second the la-la land math that the Conservative Party is using on this issue.
But for months, Justin Trudeau's Atlantic caucus has been making its own calculations about what a lack of adjustment on the carbon tax may cost the Liberals.
I think they will lose seats. Not just in Newfoundland, not just in Atlantic Canada, but indeed right across the country, if they don't get a grasp on this.
And today the Prime Minister made it clear those numbers were on his mind.
Many people in Atlantic Canada and in rural communities across the country rely on home heating oil.
On home heating oil, rural Canadians will get a 3-year reprieve from the impact of the carbon tax and double the rebate on the tax for gasoline from 10 to 20%. The government is also expanding the definition of who qualifies as a rural Canadian and providing more incentives to switch to heat pumps across the country.
This is an important moment where we're adjusting policies so that they have the right outcome. We are supporting Canadians while we fight climate change.
Home heating bills are up. The shift also comes after an anti-carbon tax campaign led by Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre that has helped boost his standing in the polls.
Home heating bills have doubled. Seniors wonder how they're going to keep the heat on because this tax is going to be tripled, and tripled.
A sentiment echoed by the progressive Conservative Premier of Nova Scotia.
Life just got a lot less affordable for Nova Scotians.
Trudeau was flanked by his Atlantic caucus MPs when making the announcement. It's meant to placate their concerns, but there's no telling how Liberal MPs pushing his environmental agenda may react. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Israel has conducted another land raid into Gaza, the largest of its campaign yet, and it confirms more airstrikes are to come. The crisis is approaching the 3-week mark, and as Israel gears up for more ground incursions that it says will target Hamas, there seems to be no end in sight. More now from the CBC's Susan Ormiston.
Gaza bombarded again for a 20th straight day. People exhausted, wondering whether they'll survive to the next day.
I can't, when I hear the shelling, especially between 12 and 3 a.m., which is usually a heavy period, it just kind of imagine, okay, if it's gonna hit here or there, what's gonna be the impact, it's scary.
Naila Shawa sleeps in a car because there's no room in the house she shares with her family and 55 others.
And there is like no hope for anything. So it's hard to think about the future. If there will be anything, it won't be going back.
Airstrikes have killed over 7,000 people, according to the Hamas-run health authority. Last night, Hamas sent a missive back. A barrage of rockets slammed into an apartment block in central Israel close to Tel Aviv. The Iron Dome did not intercept. Daniel Tetsabi got his wife and 7-year-old to safety, but his apartment was badly damaged. He's convinced there's only one option: to try to put an end to the threat. There's no choice. If they can reach Rishon in the center in Tel Aviv, there's no chance. We must take care of it. Hamas is a terror organization, he said.
Attacks like these put more pressure on the Israeli government to move into Gaza with a ground incursion. That's what many of these residents expect. Last night, tanks and troops did go in a targeted raid.
At least 12 tanks and troops pushed into Gaza overnight, pounding through the boundary fence. The Israeli military says it attacked anti-tank positions, tunnel shafts, and command posts, and declared more raids like this one will come. Hamas is threatening with more rockets, too. The sirens ringing out again in the same spot near Tel Aviv today, sending people running for shelter. Us, too. This time, the rockets were intercepted in the sky above. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Rishon Lezion, Israel.
With protection from the Iron Dome no guarantee, and with lingering questions about security failures during Hamas's attack, Margaret Evans spoke with some of the Israelis taking safety into their own hands, buying guns in growing numbers.
A target range on the edge of Gush Etzion, an Israeli settlement block in the occupied Palestinian territories of the West Bank. The number of Israelis buying guns has jumped in the wake of the October 7th attacks, the government making it easier.
Right now it's in a week. It's very, very quick, very quick.
This is a one-stop shop for training, licensing, and buying a gun if you're Israeli.
I think everyone in Israel, I don't think only in Israel, I think around the world were shaken by what happened.
The gun I got is a Glock 43X. That's the one I chose.
Kalanet Taub, a mother, says she wasn't a gun person before the horrific Hamas attacks.
I feel that the gun is the only option I have to defend myself, and that's why I'm getting one today.
Israeli settlements are considered illegal by much of the international community, built on land the Palestinians hope will one day form part of a Palestinian state. Hardline Jewish religious settlers say the land is theirs by biblical right, and there are fears more guns in the settlements could increase violence toward Palestinians in the wake of October 7th. It was already on the rise, with hardline ultranationalist Itamar Ben-Gvir now in the post of National Security Minister. He's already pledged to hand out 4,000 rifles to settlers in the occupied territories for free. And on Wednesday, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urged Israelis to arm themselves privately ahead of an expected Israeli ground invasion into Gaza. It's not only settlers, but people inside Israel, too. Tel Aviv journalist Mirav Arlozorov says it reflects the generational trauma the Jewish people carry with them.
People were left for hours in their homes while terrorists were butchering them, burning them alive, and it's a huge trauma. And it really brought out all those basic fears that we must protect ourselves. We used to trust the army to do that. Now we cannot even trust the army.
But she herself is not in favor of relaxing gun laws.
It's a very bad response, and we will regret it.
And these are the most uncertain of times. Margaret Evans, CBC News, in the occupied West Bank.
Counting fish can be a mind-numbing job, but important work if you are at a hatchery. But the task is now being taken over by AI. We'll tell you how it's done and the impact right after this.
Here at McGill University, a fifth of students are Canadians coming to study here from outside of Quebec. The university's in for a big change next fall, though, as new undergraduate admissions will have to pay almost double the current tuition.
The most affordable to the least affordable for out-of-province students in the country.
Quebec says it will even the playing field, but is that true? And will it benefit the French language? We're at Concordia University, where an undergraduate arts and science student will pay about $9,000 if they're coming to study from out of province. Next year, it will increase to about $17,000. But let's compare that to the rest of the country. At Toronto Metropolitan University, for example, out-of-province students studying there pay $8,000 to $12,000. At the University of British Columbia, tuition for Canadian students is about $5,000 to $10,000. But Montreal isn't Toronto or Vancouver. The cost of living is cheaper, and that's one factor to consider. Now, some experts argue that the new tuition will better reflect the true cost of university. In other words, the government doesn't want to subsidize the education of out-of-province students anymore.
The government is not charging more than what it actually costs to study in a university program in Quebec.
So will Quebec continue to attract students? The Minister of Higher Education says prices for programs like law, medicine, or dentistry will remain competitive, but the universities say that's just not true, and the new tuitions will dissuade students from coming here.
I call it catastrophic, and I think that's not overemphasizing the scope.
So what exactly is the province trying to do here? Well, the government partly blames international and English-speaking post-secondary students for a decline in the use of the French language. That's a claim that's supported by data from the Commissioner for the French language here in Quebec.
It's not against the Anglophones, it's to protect French.
The number of non-permanent residents living in Quebec has exploded in the last decade, according to the Commissioner. 10 years ago, Quebec had 100,000 non-permanent residents. Now it has nearly 350,000. But data from the province's immigration ministry shows they don't stay in Quebec long term. Now, of course, the government keeps tabs on how many graduates leave the province, but those figures haven't been made public yet, despite us asking. For international students, the minimum rate will also now be set at $20,000. The government says not subsidizing tuition for non-Quebecers will free up about $110 million. The government plans to redistribute that to French universities and to make Quebec more attractive to French-speaking international students. The experts we spoke to doubt that $100 million will change the playing field. Meanwhile, English universities are left scrambling late into the year, trying to pivot the way that they recruit international and out-of-province students.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Hurricane Otis has left at least 27 people dead in southwestern Mexico. The full extent of the damage in Acapulco is now clearer after communications were essentially cut off. Yvette Brend shows us the devastation.
This is the devastation Otis left behind. Acapulco, torn apart.
Wow.
This sixth-floor apartment now just a shell.
And I woke up with the sound of the windows kind of like shaking, and I didn't know what was going on. I stepped into the living room and I there was no living room, essentially. There was no furniture.
No puede ser posible.
It was a direct hit on the popular resort city with winds up to 260 kilometers per hour that swayed hotels and tore off roofs and destroyed walls. This young tourist says she hid in a bathroom. Mexico's president says Acapulco has suffered a true disaster like they've never seen before.
This is by far the strongest hurricane ever to have occurred on this section of the Mexican coast. And so there just isn't really historical context for this.
Otis grew from a tropical storm to Category 5 in less than 24 hours, and warnings came too late.
Typically, we do have pretty good forecasts for hurricanes. Usually there is much better advance warning than we saw in this case, but clearly that didn't happen this time.
Power and internet are still down. Roads are damaged and the airport remains closed. Now 500,000 people dealing with devastation.
The state Guerrero is one of the poorest states in Mexico. And so I think it's going to be really hard to build back.
And the reality of what this will do to a region that survives on tourism. Yvette Bren, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Health-Sick First Nation and Wild Salmon Centre have teamed up to pioneer new technology that uses artificial intelligence to count BC salmon returns in real time. Have a look at this.
The AI comes in the form of tracking and identifying every fish that swims past our video camera. So essentially, the AI is fulfilling the role that a technician would otherwise fill, spending oftentimes 4 or 5 months reviewing the video before we have a final count. And yeah, the weir is a fence in the river, so it essentially forces the fish to swim through our 2 video chutes. And those video chutes are recording continuous video, as I mentioned, so we get a video of every fish that swims into the river.
This is going to increase the efficiency and quality in the data collection, and really will just allow us to make better decisions and have stronger governance when it comes to managing sockeye systems in our territory. And it's really an extension of title and rights over the ability to manage salmon systems, and allows us to develop management plans that we can are based on real data and with a very low confidence of error. And so it's a great fit for us.
We're working with Pacific Salmon Foundation and 9 other First Nations across the BC coast, and we're actually going to be applying this technology at a variety of different project sites. And so the hope is that in the next couple of years, we'll be generating real-time count information at First Nation-run weirs up and down the coast.
Darius Madavi is back with a forecast. Neat to see using technology. It would be a big job counting fish.
It would. Not the most fun one.
No. But important, as they said.
Yes, very important. But also probably more exciting than this. Ready? This is 10 seconds of there being no rain and no cloud.
Whoa,
right
slow
through the
down,
weekend.
soldier.
Fascinating, right? Yeah, pretty much nothing here on the south coast right through Sunday morning. If we were to zoom out to the rest of the province, pretty similar. Not really anything else to speak of. A bit of cloud right now that's passing through. We saw that little bit of snow that was going to come to the southeast in the Kootenays. But other than that, a bit of cloud starts to build in over the weekend in the north, but really not much at all. We have this ridge of high pressure sitting over the province that's keeping us cool, but also dry and pretty clear. And then we have this trough that passed here in the southeast that brought that snow. But other than that, it's not until some of the low pressure starts to break into the north that we start to see some cloud and really anything at all happening in the province. That being said, some of the cool air that we had, you can see here already, starting to clear out. So here's temperatures tomorrow. As we head later into the weekend, we see even more warm temperatures. So a lot of that cold air moving out, meaning we start to come back to seasonal. So by Tuesday on Halloween, we might see temperatures that might be okay for trick-or-treating and not, terribly dangerous to be outside in. That might be dramatic, but we have lots of sun happening tomorrow, a little bit of cloud in the north and in the southeast as we saw, but even that going to clear up through the afternoon for a very sunny start to the weekend. And here in Vancouver, the most boring fall forecast ever. Nothing but sun right through Halloween. Temperatures fortunately do start to come up a little bit, although the lows do stay low. So early trick-or-treating is probably the right call here.
Okay, smart.
Yeah, but that's about it. But outside of weather news, I do have something a little bit more exciting. Because the province has just announced we have a provincial fossil, which is very exciting for the first time. It is the elasmosaur. You can see it here. Yes, spectacular. It used to swim off in the waters off Vancouver Island when a lot more of the land was water. It was first discovered near Courtenay. It's the first fossil discovered west of the Rockies, meaning not first fossil, but the first elasmosaur fossil.
Right.
And they are spectacular. They're about 10 to 14 meters long. There's a bust of one hanging in the UBC Earth Sciences building, and it's mostly neck, which is something.
Must be fun to put a bow tie on that.
Oh, that would be nice.
Very cool. Always nice to have a dinosaur.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Doris.
Not a dinosaur.
The city of Montreal is getting ready to ban natural gas connections in some new buildings. Gas-powered heating systems, stoves, barbecues, and pools are among the items that won't be an option in buildings under 3 stories. It's part of the city's goal to become carbon neutral by 2050. More now from Sharon Yonan-Reynolds.
This one is a gas one.
These fireplaces are Normand Hamel's bread and butter. He says with enough loyal customers, he isn't worried about the new bylaw affecting business. The same can't be said for his fellow vendors who work with developers.
People who are, I would say, specialized to new construction, they are working with contractors. Maybe they can be affected about this law.
Starting next October, gas hookups for most new buildings of 3 floors or fewer will be banned. The bylaw means that gas-powered furnaces like these couldn't be installed in new buildings, along with gas-powered stoves, water heaters, and other appliances that draw from gas lines. There will be some exceptions, including emergency generators and commercial stoves in restaurants. Larger buildings can include gas hookups, but they will have to use renewable gas as of April 2025.
The building sector represents about 25% right now of the total of GHG emission. So this is a very important milestone.
Environmental groups say it's a step in the right direction.
It's a first step only, but it's a major step, and we need to move ahead. We can't leave that planet like this to our kids.
He says next, they want the city to tackle gas lines in all buildings. Hydro-Quebec says that's not realistic for their network yet.
It would take a lot more of electricity production, more transmission lines, and more powerful distribution networks.
The city says the effect of the ban may seem minor, but it's the beginning of a transition towards more sustainable construction practices. The bylaw is expected to be formally adopted at City Council in December. Sharon Yonan-Reynolds, CBC News, Montreal.
Just imagine running for more than 100 hours straight. BC ultra runner did just that, coming in second in one of the world's hardest races. Stick around for this.
I'm about to go into this haunted house and I'm really freaked out. But that got me thinking, why is so much about Halloween so scary? From the time of year to trick-or-treating to costumes, all of their origins have to do with something pretty freaky, the dead. Let's head inside to find out more. Okay. Halloween's deathly origins have roots in many different cultures and places. There are many festivals, celebration, and days that recognize the dead all over the world. They're often seen as a time where the spirit world and the world of the living overlap. Scary, right? But one big question I had about Halloween is, how come it's at the end of October? Various ancient pagan cultures marked this time of year with festivals and celebrations. It was a time when crops and plants were dying, the seasons were changing, and harvests were happening. Imagine doing this at night. For example, some ancient Celts in Ireland and Scotland believed this was a time of year where dead spirits would come back and roam the land of the living. Some even believed their dead relatives would come visit their homes. Okie dokie. Andale. When Christianity came along, Some experts believe they wanted to replace the pagan festivals with Christian ones. Around the 7th century, the Pope created a holiday season called All Hallows Tide around the same time of year. Whoa, these lasers are so trippy. It was a 3-day holiday meant to celebrate saints and the souls of the recently dead. Hallow is an Old English word for holy or saints, and November 1st was All Saints' Day, or All Hallows' Day. So the day before All Hallows' Day was called All Hallows' Eve, which became Halloween. Bottom line, both the pagan festival and Christian holiday had a big focus on the dead. And what's it dressing up in costumes? How does that tie into spirits and the dead? Well, there's some evidence that those ancient Celtic festivals involved dressing up to hide from spirits visiting the living world. And of course, many other cultures include costumes and getting dressed up around their celebrations of the dead. One example is in Scotland and England around the 16th century. People would dress up to impersonate dead souls, or to protect themselves from them. Does that work? If it does, I'm kind of wishing I had a costume right now to protect me from this. Okay, I think I've spent enough time with the dead. Time to get back to the land of the living for some fun trick-or-treating. Happy Halloween, or All Hallows Eve, or whatever you want to call it.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. With the changes to how Canada is able to access journalism online and on social media, we want to assure you that when you're looking for CBC News, you'll always be able to find us. Wherever you are in BC, local news, breaking stories, and the latest from around the world is at your fingertips any time of the day with the free CBC News app and online at cbcnews.ca. Download the CBC News app and stay connected wherever you are.
A Chilliwack man placed second in the Backyard Ultra in Bell Buckle, Tennessee on Wednesday. It's considered one of the hardest marathons on earth. Ihor Veyriz ran about 715 kilometers in 107 hours. His friend Nick Jarvis tells us why it's such an intriguing race.
Backyard Ultras are sort of like this increasingly popular niche of ultra running, really, sort of a last person standing event. So the majority of these Backyard Ultras, they take place on a looped course. Each loop is approximately 6.7 kilometers. The reason for that is that after 24 hours, each runner would have completed 100 miles. And the interesting thing about the looped course is they're expected to finish each loop in an hour. Once they finish, they have to wait to start the next loop on the hour. So you can't finish one loop and then start the next one early. You have to wait for everybody to start on the hour together. So that brings up some interesting strategic aspects of how you want to time your rests. You know, do you want to finish the loop early and have a bit more rest time? Do you want to finish it a bit later but go at a slower pace? There's a lot of really interesting strategy involved. It doesn't necessarily favor the fastest runners. It favors whoever has that real endurance and strong mind and willpower. Let's say, for example, so Ihor, he's finishing each loop in maybe around 51, 52 minutes. So that gives him maybe 7 to 8 minutes to maybe quickly shut his eyes, catch a few minutes sleep before he gets back out there. And, he's hoping that maybe accumulates to some rest throughout the how many ever days they've been out there, I guess since Saturday. To each their own with the recovery, but I would expect Ihor to, I don't think he's going to be able to do much for at least a week. He'll definitely have some brain fog. I think it'll probably be, at least a month before he's feeling like himself again.
Nah. Halloween does mean decorating for a whole lot of people and items that can be scary or silly, but this one may cause some bad blood. Yes, that's a pumpkin painted to look like Taylor Swift. Taylor Swiftkin weighs about 181 kilograms, about 400 pounds. Her hair is made from over 9 wigs. Her ears are sweet potatoes. She even has a little football dedicated to number 87 himself, Kansas City tight end Chiefs Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce, the Ohio artist behind Taylor Swiftkin, has been creating a celebrity pumpkin for 35 years. And as a breast cancer survivor, she uses those pumpkins to spread the word that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Good cause. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC. Janella Hamilton will be here at 11 o'clock. Good night.